Well, a big warm hello to Katie Taylor eventually. Um, Sorry,
That's
Katie, that we're
okay.
having to record this and then upload it. What a bloomin' palaver. But we will sort it out. So I can see you've got your lovely banner and everything behind you there.
Oh,
Tell everybody what the
yes.
Latte Lounge is so that they can be introduced to you.
Yeah. So the Latte Lounge is basically an online platform for women over 40 or anyone who is struggling with either any midlife health and well-being issues or going through early menopause, or anything, even if it's an early diagnosis of things like breast cancer or that kind of thing. So that's it in a nutshell, really.
And it started because of your menopause experience, which we've known each other for a few years now. So I remember when it literally started as a Facebook group, and I came along to do a reading when I wrote my menopause book back in 2017, 18. I can't remember exactly when it was. Um, how Why did you
Yeah.
decide to set up the group in the first place? Talk us through that.
Yeah, so, well, look, I mean, I'll take you back 10 years. I'm 53 now. Actually, I've just turned 54. So, but when I was 43, I was a very busy mum. I had four kids, four young kids, and I was coping with life really well, actually. I was going back and forward to school, and I was working full time for a children's charity running their communications and marketing team. But over the next sort of 4 year period, so from the ages of about 43 to 47, I wasn't coping as well. I was suffering with very low mood, very teary, feeling pretty depressed. I used to walk to school and it felt like I was kind of walking in a fog or sort of walking in sticky treacle. And it was almost this sort of feeling of having zero joy in my life. And yet I had a good life. I had a great husband. Thankfully, we've been married nearly 30 years, but a very supportive husband, a nice job, four great kids, lots of friends. And I was a coper, sort of bubbly, outgoing, easygoing sort of person. But everything felt like a massive effort. I'd go to work and it was like I was staring at a different language. I'd be presented with a budget or say, what about this? And I couldn't make any kind of decisions. And I tried to sort of bluff my way through a bit, but I felt a bit like a sort of imposter syndrome, like I was a fraud and should never have really been there. I then started getting heart palpitations, aching joints, really just feeling scared that I was forgetting words as well. And I was thinking, oh my God, is this early onset dementia? So, to cut a long story short, I went back and forward to different doctors. I was sent to every specialist under the sun, and every time they kept saying, this is depression, you're working too hard, you're juggling too much, you can't possibly have it all. And they recommended I go on antidepressants and try and either give up work or go part time. The antidepressants made me feel numb. I felt this disconnect and I didn't believe that I was depressed. Eventually, I did give up work because I was exhausted. I mean, I used to have about 2 hours sleep a night. The insomnia was horrendous. Now, I never had hot flushes and I was still having periods. So, at no point did anyone sort of put two and two together. That was until my father, he's now a retired breast cancer professor. And I said to him, Dad, I think I'm going mad. I think I'm a hypochondriac. I just don't feel right. And he said, look, Katie, I think this could be hormonal. You're 47. I want you to go and see a gynecologist who I work with at UCH. She deals with hormone health. So I went to see her, and within about 10 minutes of me telling her about my symptoms, she said, Katie, this is classic perimenopause. Your estrogen levels are on the floor. And I was like, what is that? Like, I'd never heard of the word perimenopause. She explained to me that we have estrogen receptors all over our body, and that was because I was so depleted. That was why all these symptoms, which I thought were not connected, were all presenting themselves. So to cut a very long story short, she prescribed me hormone replacement therapy, HRT, which was the right treatment option for me. And I went home that night and kind of cried on my bed, in relief that I wasn't going mad. But I also felt very angry that I'd lost this sort of 4 years of really good quality life, and had become a bit of a hermit, given up my job, and just was a really pretty awful mum and daughter and friend at the time. So I did what a lot of women back then did before any other social media app existed, which was to turn to Facebook. And I set up a Facebook group really to see if anyone else had felt the same. And I kind of thought, oh, they'll be just, my friends will join and just sort of have a nose around. And I mean, you've heard the story a million times, but I had 1,000 member requests in 24 hours. And I was like, oh my God, okay, I'm not alone. So yeah, that's the kind of history. And we're 7 years old this week, Saturday, actually. So that seems ages ago now.
Well, do you know what? It is all testament to you and your perseverance and your loyalty to the cause, because your experience was in on one side horrific, and sadly on the other side so common, as we both
Mm.
know with the work that we've done over the past few years within this space. But it's your perseverance to keep going and sort of grow with it. And I know how hard it's been for you and how challenging it's been for you, and all of it, tech, the overwhelming amount of advice that people want and support that they want for you, and you've kept going with it. Tell me how the Latte Lounge has grown from a simple Facebook group for, offering tips to women over 40, to now you have become, you're 20,000 people strong now. You've now expanded, so it's not purely to do with, midlife situations. It is menopause, it is cancer. You've lined up with the Eve appeal as well. Why did you decide to
Mm.
broaden out?
Well, I think because I'm a doctor's daughter and I've grown up surrounded by medics. My dad's one of five, and every single one of his brothers ended up going into whether it was pediatrics or biochemistry. So I always sort of was the one that was like, oh God, I'm not a doctor. I never had a sort of scientific brain. I always was the sort of communicator. And I used to sit around the table and say to Dad, right, now tell me that in English, because I said, I don't understand what you're saying. And so I knew I was always good at breaking down complicated information and making it easy for other people to understand. So all these poor women, I mean, the group is now about 25,000 women, but they were coming in their thousands with all their issues. And although other women are really well-meaning, giving advice, sometimes it can be wrong, which is dangerous or slightly misleading. And I wanted to help these women. I've grown up surrounded by other people that help, and it's kind of in my blood. So I put together a medical advisory team and built a website, which so that when they came to the group, I could immediately go to the doctors or to a blog that had been written and say, right, here's the information you're looking for, so you don't have to waste 4 years like I did. I want to help. The whole point of what we do is support, inform, and signpost. So the minute you come to me, I imagine you're me. And how am I going to get you sorted in day one so that you don't have to waste 4 years? So that's always the back of my mind. Secondly, I'm not comfortable with business. I don't like it. I'm not comfortable asking people for money. I hate selling things. Everything has to be very evidence-based. That's the sort of, again, the doctor's daughter. So I wanted it to, at least, having given up my own job, I wanted to feel like this platform had a purpose. So I chatted to my dad and we went and visited a few charities, and I said, look, who do you think we should best support? And the reason we both chose the Eve appeal is because it's the only UK gynecological cancer charity in this country that the focus is on research. And in the same way that he went into breast cancer care because his own mother died the most horrific death and in terrible pain, the only way for these sort of illnesses to stop is to pump money into research. So it aligned really, really well with me. And I think whenever I'm looking at what I'm doing, I'm always thinking of other ways I can reach other women. So it can't just be your sort of average, middle class sort of, fairly well-to-do women. I want to be reaching those women in, in really deprived areas, and so or who don't have access to good healthcare. So, we set up our podcast, which is Midlife and Menopause Uncovered, and that's for women who perhaps are very short on time, and I can connect them to world-leading experts, and they know they're getting, this evidence-based information, because you and I both know there's so many voices out there, and lots of women or companies are jumping on the sort of menopause bandwagon because it kind of ticks a box. And some of them are doing an amazing job, but some of them may be doing it to take advantage of vulnerable women. And I'm not about that. I always talk about my father, but he set up something called Quackbusters. And Quackbusters is about sort of saying no to those snake charmers that actually know your sort of, whatever they call it, your snake oil is not going to cure cancer. And I don't want you to go down that rabbit hole. So we do the podcast. You've been one of my biggest supporters since day one. So and I can never thank you enough for that. I think, the Midlife Festival you spoke at last year, or year one. And again, the Midlife Festival is just a free online event. We bring together sort of 25 leading experts on all things midlife, women's health and well-being. And last year that reached 13,000 women because it was free. And, the feedback on that's been amazing. So that's kind of that. And then lastly, my main passion, other than all this, is to campaign. So I met a lovely lady called Diane Danzibrink right at the beginning, and she set up the Make Menopause Matter campaign, and I've been back and forwards with her to Westminster over many years to get asked for menopause to be on the secondary school curriculum, which it now is in England, to also have all doctors trained in it, because sadly and ridiculously it's not on the medical school curriculum, and for all workplaces to have policies and support in place. So, that's a real passion of mine. And that's why I go into workplaces now and talk about my journey like this, so that other women and people in charge, managers, understand that these issues are real, and can support women, to stay in the workplace so they don't leave like I did. I've talked
What's
too long.
wonderful about everything that you've just said there is, obviously, in my community we cover a whole range of anything to do with women going through midlife, but we have women who will be listening to that and think, do you know what? I need to reach out to you and bring you into my workplace. Women think, right, I'm going to listen to your podcast. Women thinking, right, actually, I'm going to check out your website, which is brilliant. So you've given everybody a potted history of everything that you can offer them. For people which is wonderful, and the work you've done is amazing, and I'm right behind you and walking alongside you. Anything you want from me, you've got it. You've got it. For someone who's watching this today because they are where you were when you were 43, what would you say, what's the most common feelings, whether that's a mentally or physically, that women may be experiencing, that maybe they're kind of dismissing it and thinking, well, it can't be menopause because I haven't stopped my periods, which is the most common thing that I hear. Well, I can't be perimenopausal, I still have my periods, they're kind of all over the place, or even they're fairly regular. So what are the most common symptoms medically and physically that women could be experiencing that are most likely to be perimenopause, but they're dismissing it?
Yeah, I mean, for anyone that's watching, my biggest advice is we have a symptom checklist on our website, which is free to download. We always say there's about 34 symptoms, but there's up to 50, and there's probably more. But if you're feeling like lack of joy, low motivation, low mood, low libido, brain fog is always the worst. A lot of people complain. If your periods are, perhaps fluctuating, they're either shorter or heavier. It could be. Now, I'm not saying, there's lots of women who may actually be suffering from depression, and the reason I say print off our symptom checklist is because you only have a 10-minute GP appointment. So use that appointment really carefully. Get all your research done before you go, because a lot of GPs are still sadly not up to date. That is changing from 24 to next year. It will be on the curriculum. But at least if you go and say, look, here's my symptom checklist. I'm going through all these different things. You know, I've got hot palpitations, hot flushes, aching joints, and you don't have to have all of them, even just one or two. If they're troubling you and affecting your life like it did mine, then you need to be taken seriously. Now, there's lots of women that, you know, HRT for me was the missing piece in the puzzle. And I must add, like you did, Andrea, I ended up having to have a hysterectomy. I had very heavy bleeding to a point where I couldn't leave the house. So I only need estrogen now. Estrogen is all you need if you don't have a womb. If you have a womb, you need progesterone, because protects the womb lining from endometrial cancer. So, so if for me, I tried to lose weight. I put on 4 stone of weight. I tried to eat healthy. I tried to move more. But you get into a vicious circle of the more exhausted and depressed you are, the more you comfort eat, the more you don't move, the more you can't engage with a fitness program. So it's about where you come into that circle. Do I try and attack it with, nutrition and exercise? I did, and that didn't help. HRT for me was my missing piece, and at least go and have that conversation. Make it an informed joint decision with your doctor. Weigh up your own benefits and risks. Don't listen to any alarming headlines. They were from a flawed trial, which has now been overthrown. But just go prepared, go armed. If you're allowed, get a double appointment and go with a partner if you're allowed, because you may forget things. I certainly did. I was full of overwhelm. But yeah, especially the worst thing is that feeling of joylessness, just feeling completely and utterly disconnected and finding no joy in life. But I think the symptom checklist is the most important thing to do at this stage, so that you start to think, okay. And actually, if anyone wants to listen, the very first episode of my podcast, I tell my story, and then I think the next episode, I explain how to navigate the medical system. So although always go to your GP first, if you're getting nowhere and you're it's just going round in circles, and the wait list for a menopause specialist is just so long. We have a online menopause clinic called the Latte Lounge Plus, which we recently joined up with an organisation who runs the medical side of it. It's a much cheaper option. And then there's private one-to-one menopause specialists as well, which is obviously much more expensive, but at least you have those, 3 options. But look, if anyone's watching and I stay up all night terribly, and I know I shouldn't, answering emails, but I'm very happy to signpost people, to where they should go.
Well, your website is so informed. You have menopause resources. I'm looking at it now. What is menopause? Common symptoms, how and where to get help, find a menopause specialist, your options, busting myths, sex and relationships, mental health and menopause, weight management, or, it goes on and on. And what's wonderful is that's clearly built up, those resources, and understanding the need for those different topic headings has clearly come over the past 7 years, because those are the different kind of questions that you've been asked. So I'm going to put the link to your website in this chat anyway, so that there is pretty much every bit of information that anyone could possibly need, and also that it can be trusted. There's no hysteria there. There's no ulterior motive. It's purely it's tried and tested, and there to benefit you. Katie, what's next for you? It looks like, from where I'm sitting and seeing where you've come sort of 7 years on, that it's become a sort of well-oiled machine. Is it just carrying on as you are now, or do you have any big plans?
Oh, I wish. Look, as I said, I don't love business. I never meant to set up a business. I've had to, obviously, in order not to drown, sort of put together a small team of, there's about 5 of us now, part-timers, who who helped me to keep it going. We launched a small private membership as well last year. For we run, master classes every month, probably a bit like you do, with specialists, so that people can get more sort of hand holding. Look, I've been asked to write a book, which is very, very exciting. It's overwhelming and daunting. You're the first to hear this. And I actually love writing. But what I will say is I don't practice what I preach, which is really common of midlife women, that we tend to sort of people please and say yes to everything. And I've got 4 kids who, although they're now older teens, early 20s, for some reason their demands are more than ever now. And my parent, we're the sandwich generation. My parents are getting older and they need me more. And what I would say is I would love to be able to work kind of smarter, not harder. And at the moment, for the last 7 years, I've been working 24/7, and it's not good for anyone, me and the people we look after. So, we're looking for ways to get more people to sort of help support the platform and me, so that we can reach, an even sort of wider group. But we've got the Midlife Festival again this October. I'm recording at the moment. And hopefully the book will be, well, it'll probably be at least a year. But yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I'll stop when there's no need to bang on anymore about what we do. And look, the good thing is everyone is now talking about it. Lastly, without sort of name dropping, but I found myself bizarrely in front of number 10 Downing Street about a month ago. And I was like, that was the biggest imposter syndrome event that ever happened to me. I was like, what am I doing here? And my husband was like, you're so down on yourself all the time. And I said, I just felt kind of, how did I get here? And actually, I think what happened was I've become sort of part of this movement of women wanting to change the face of menopause care and women's health for the next generation. And actually, we had a roundtable meeting with the Women's Health Ambassador, Dame Leslie Reagan, and the Conservative MP, Maria Caulfield. And actually hearing this sort of 10-year women's health strategy plan and giving information from my experience and everyone in our community was so amazing. For me, it was like, it's all been worth it, because they are listening. It might not seem like they're listening. They are listening. It's just going to take time. But I'm confident that as Diane always says, we will be the generation to make menopause matter.
That is a brilliant point to end. Katie, thank you so much. And thank you for your patience today and for helping me battle through trying to do a Facebook Live that didn't work. We've ended up recording it.
Well, we got there in the end. Tech is horrible.
We got there in the end. Thank you, Katie.
Oh, pleasure.